Evening, good morning, pleasant midday to everyone. We're going live again. We are live. Tashaji, thank you. Thank you for being here. Emerald Caterers, wonderful. Thank you. Um, I'm going to begin this afternoon with a lot of people have been asking questions about the women in Montserrat because remember that this whole thing is centered around these two issues, these two groups of people, these two matters that are central to my being and to my work in the world, which, for those of you who haven't been on before, let me remind you, are Montserrat, this little island in the Caribbean, and the people who belong there, most of whom no longer live there. And we talk about that as we go along. And women. A lot of this we're going to be talking about here is how these things combine, how they connect, how they intersect, and what it means. And because I've got over the last 4 days, because again, if you haven't been on before, you would not necessarily know yet that this came up with my friends, and it literally got done in the space of about 2 days. 2 days. So there was not much preparation. We're inviting people to join. We continue to invite people to join. I'll be here for the next 40 something days. And we're going to be touching on a lot of issues because all of them are germane to women's existence. And because part of what this is about, actually what drove this was this organization that I've started called the Women's Leadership Circle, which has come out of the work I've been doing over the years with women, both in Montserrat, this little island where I'm from, and in the other parts of the world. And what I was saying was several women have responded to my request to tell me what to talk about for 45 days. Several women have said, tell us about the women in Montserrat, what it means to be a woman in Montserrat, how the women are in Montserrat. And actually it's perfect because it gives me a chance to give you insight into how I come to be the woman that I am and why I got to be here, why I'm in this position doing these things, and sort of how my brain works and where I see myself in the world and how I see women really. So today I'm going to spend a little bit of time doing that. So women in Montserrat, the women in Montserrat are in the same position that women are everywhere in the world. There is no country in the world. There is not a country in the world in which women are fully accepted, fully supported, allowed to just be and contribute all of the gifts and talents and skills and abilities that we have. Even the most quote unquote developed, advanced countries, women are not allowed to just be and do. And you see it, even though there are women in high office, women in as CEOs in some places, women as heads of government, even there, women are still expected to not be too much of this or too much of that. Or we're expected to behave like men. And then when we do, we get told, no, you're behaving like a man and that's not acceptable. So that is the same thing in Montserrat. The interesting thing about Montserrat is that there also are a lot of women in high office in the government, for example. So you have levels of government, you have ministers of government, and then the level below that is permanent secretaries who are sort of high-level civil servants. And they have a whole lot of power, but a power that's granted to them through the men who are the government. And when I say the men, I really mean the men. In Montserrat, since 1950s, we've had one woman at least in office every time the government, after every election. The first woman was elected in 1956 or something, I think, somewhere around there. And in every election since then, we've had at least one. There was one time when we had two women in office. There might have been maybe twice when there were two women in office. It's a small parliament of 11 people, 9 elected and 2 others. So it's not, but the challenge is that these women, in the 70 years since we first had women elected, none has risen to the leadership of the country. And that, again, is not unusual anywhere. because when women step up for positions of office in Montserrat as anywhere else, they get pushed back, and in their countries where women get killed just for wanting to run the country. And so in Montserrat, although we have, and men say that, I mean, some years ago, the University of the West Indies was doing a series of lectures, and they asked me to do a presentation on women, to give a lecture on women. And that's what I said. I said that there are all these women in these positions of authority ostensibly, but really not. And so that kind of confuses the issue. So men say, well, look at that. There are all these women, permanent secretaries. They are principals of schools. They have a high office in the bank. Not the manager of the banks, mind you, just high office. And I say, yes, but the highest offices still are held by men. And then my own personal story. So let me back up a little bit, and I'll come to that. My mother was a teacher. My mother was one of those women who went to England from the Caribbean, from Montserrat, in the 1950s to go to school. And then she and my father came back to the island to live and work. And that was a time when British colonialism was just being disbanded, and countries in Africa, Southeast Asia, and so on were agitating for their independence. And so there's a lot of independent spirit in the islands. My father got into politics at that same time, and my mother, as a dutiful wife, supported him. My mother was a teacher and very, very intellectual. My father was one of those men. He walked into a room and the whole room would light up. Charisma, charisma to die for. And he was a really good talker. He was really good, and he's really good with people. So together they worked, and my father's political career took off. And again, like I said, my mother was very, very much the supporter, and I was the supporter of them, because I was the child who stayed up at night when my mother was writing his speeches and so on, and helped and supported. And my mother is typical of women in Montserrat, women in the Caribbean. Women in the Caribbean have generally been very, very, very active in politics, even in colonial times, but always in terms of support, the grassroots. And it's true around the world, actually. And when people want to move something, they go to women. Why? Because women are the ones with that sort of influence, that sort of spread, that sort of reach. They know more people. And even in countries, especially actually perhaps in countries where women are much more, women's movements are much more restricted than they are in countries of the West, the politicians, who do they use? They use women, because women can get to other women and, perpetuate the male perspective, which is something we probably get to talk about. And so in terms of politics and governance and leadership, that's where women are in Montserrat. On the surface, they are very visible in the offices of power, but in reality, their power is very limited and considered so and held so. And so in 2014, I went back to the islands. I was living in the US, and I went back to the islands to participate in the elections, actually to support my brother who was running for election. I was doing what women do. I went to support my brother's elections, right? I got there, the party was in disarray. I pulled it together with a lot of hard work and a few of the other members. We pulled it together, and I chaired the party to the election. We won the election, won it handily, actually. And then the men decided, well, okay, thank you very much. Some of the men actually did that. And some weeks after that, now the winning party in Montserrat gets to decide who the speaker is. And so they asked me to be the speaker. At first I said no, because my plan was to come back to the United States and do my life. But then I thought it's a really interesting position. And it was one that had not, up until this time before that, until then had only one woman, the speaker just before me. And so I accepted the office of speaker and got the same treatment that women get. So these men who asked me to be the speaker then made it clear that you don't get to use the power that the speaker has. The speaker actually really has, because you're a woman. I mean, I had men tell me that. And I watched them in Parliament. Almost every sitting was a fight with at least one of them pushing back on being held to account by a woman. Now, those of you who know the Westminster style of Parliament, you will know that the Speaker has ultimate authority in the House. The Speaker does. The Speaker manages his or her authority how he or she wants. There are standing orders, the rules of the House, but the Speaker has ultimate authority. And the Speaker makes pronouncements, the Speaker decides very much the way a judge would decide. The Speaker's what the Speaker says is what is, and if you have a problem, there's a process for challenging that. You don't just get up and challenge the Speaker. You don't do that. Some of them tried that. And when I pushed back, I got told, "Oh, well, you're not doing what you're supposed to do, and you are in opposition to this, and you're opposition to that." And then we had this very interesting case where that was a term, and there were two members who were women, and we had this particularly interesting incident where one woman in the opposition violated standing orders, and I did what the Speaker needed to do. I responded. I sanctioned her. Men on the street there were lots of men who said to me, "You did a good job. What she did was wrong. She should not behave that way in the House. But you're a woman. You're not supposed to be doing that. It's a man who's supposed to have that job. And it's a man who's supposed to make those kinds of decisions." So the people in Montserrat are very conflicted about women. Basically, that's about what it is. They're very conflicted about women's abilities. And it's the same way around the world. It is clear that women have capacity. We have capabilities. We do contribute in science, in art, in business, in politics, in sports, everywhere. Everywhere women contribute. We make significant contributions. And yet we still get told, "You're not smart enough, not strong enough, you can't do this, you can't do that." And I remember some years ago, and I say some years, I mean like perhaps 2 or 3 years ago, I got in my inbox an invitation to, that invitation is a mass mailing invitation to a conference that was being held in Silicon Valley, the tech space in the United States. The topic was, I can't remember the exact wording right now, but basically the challenge is the absence of women in technology. They were going to discuss how it is that there are so few women in technology, and I believe part of the goal was to figure out how to change that. And there's a panel of, I think, 5 people. Not one was a woman. Not one was a woman. So there were these men who were going to decide and figure out how to get women involved, but didn't think that woman needed to be involved in the conversation. The conversations about abortion and reproductive rights in the United States is pretty much the same thing. That you have these high-level meetings to determine how women should be able to manage their reproductive choices, whether they should have children or not, whether they should have access to abortion or not. And it is men who do it. I watched a meeting, well, not the meeting, I saw the photographs of a meeting held between Ukraine and Russia about ending the war. And there was not one woman in the room. There's a table with 12, 14, 16 men, lines of men, and not one woman in the room. Montserrat is exactly the same. And that is my work. That is what inspires me, drives me, because it is not only is it unequal, that's not even the point that I want to make. It's not just that it's unequal, it's that it's unhelpful. It's that if you really want to find a solution, you include the people who A, would be affected by the solution, and B, who could actually help you come to a real solid solution that will hold. And they keep excluding women. You know, when the war started in Ukraine and the women could leave and the men couldn't. Now, of course, on one level, you thought, okay, let the women go to safety. But then you also think, why do they assume that women are they assuming that women just are not strong enough to get through wars? But of course, we also know that the wars, which are all pretty much started by men, perpetuated by men, for men's notions of power and so on. And I say that without restraint because most of the governments, the people who are in the rooms when these decisions are made, are always, almost all men. I remember hearing Hillary Clinton talk about, when she was Secretary of State, talk about being in these offices in these meetings where she was the only woman. So yes, it is men who make these decisions, and women who suffer, because women are the ones who pick up the pieces and who heal the wounds. And in all the conflicts around the world, there are women working. The conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, Israelis and the Palestinians, has been going on for. There are groups of women who are trying to pull things together. But the rules of men and the ambitions of men and the force and power and strength of men and the hubris of men has us all suffering those. So part of what I do at the Women's Leadership Circle, part of the point behind the Women's Leadership Circle is finding ways, contributing to women not developing, because I believe most women have it. It's a question of having it pulled out, because we are not socialized to be forthright and strong. And even the women in the United States, let me put it that way, because around the world you'll hear people talk about how American women, they think American women are straightforward and they're frank and they're out there and you'd be surprised that is not the general case. It is not. Because America, like everywhere else, also suppresses its women. Look around. I talked about reproductive rights. Think about when Vice President Harris was running for the election. Think about when Hillary Clinton was running for elections, and how they were treated, and things that are being said about them now that they're not treated the way men are treated. Politics, we know, is a hard, tough game. But add to that the woman, and the feminine piece just gets a whole lot more violence, and so my goal with the Women's Leadership Circle is to provide opportunities for women to be able to go into themselves and find this courage, because we need it. We need it. The whole world needs it. Little islands like Montserrat need it, and big old countries like China and the United States and India need it. And you listen to people talk all about the place. You hear this is the time of the women, and we thought we were making some progress, and we are, but progress is really, really slow. And why is that? Because we are working within the parameters set by men. We're working within the parameters set by men, even within our women's organizations. And I'll tell you more about that tomorrow or the other day, how the Women's Leadership Circle is different. Even within the women's organizations, we are held back, held down, held in by the rules that men make. The women's organizations many of them very much administer themselves the way men's organizations do. They respond to the same rules, the same requirements, the same. They demand the same expressions. Yeah, the Women's Leadership Circle is not like that, not at all. But we'll tell you about that tomorrow, because we are a good way into our 15 minutes. We are past 15 minutes. So I guess when I said that 15 minutes was a lot, it turns out it's not quite so much, because there's so much to say and so much to do. But I don't want us to be sitting here for an hour and then kind of get all glazed over. I want that when we meet, we get some information and then we move it along, and we just sort of short and sweet, and then we keep going, and keep the energy high. So, and again, I'll tell you some more about the women in Montserrat. This is just the basic. And then we'll talk some more about the organization, about other things that women have asked about. They have asked about women and climate change. Are we going to talk about climate change? Are we going to talk about politics in general? And are we going to talk about a whole series of things? And I've made the list. People have talked, when are we going to talk about shoes? And one friend of mine said we could talk about shoes as symbols of feminism, for example. How does So there's a lot of conversation to be had, and I'm really excited, really grateful to those of you who have joined and who are watching. And I still have to figure out some things here with the live stream, and because I think there's something happening with the restream. So tomorrow I'll have some younger people have a look at it and set that piece straight. And we meet tomorrow again. I'm traveling on Thursday, so we'll be meeting in airports as well. I'm moving away for a few weeks, and I'm not telling you where yet. It'll be a fun place, and I'll be meeting from there. We'll be talking from there, and that'll give you some more insight into me and why I do what I do, why this is important, and what I hope that all of us can gain from this. My firm position is that life is an exchange, and it's supposed to be not fair. It's supposed to be exchange that works. It's going to be 60-40, 70-30, 50-50, but it needs to be an exchange that works. And so every time we meet, we must all come away with something. And that's one of the reasons why I ask, tell me some of the things you want me to talk about. Tell me some of the things you want to hear about. If I don't know, I will go do some research and see what I can find. And the things that I want to talk about, I will let you know, and you will tell me how much you want to hear. And we'll have some exchanges. And I think perhaps I'm trying to find ways to make these 45 days really, really cogent and interesting and powerful. And so I don't have any limitations. They didn't tell me that I have to be the only person to speak. So what I'm going to do is, as we go along, I'm going to ask some people to speak, maybe even some of you. Yes, I'll put it out there, and those who want to join me, we'll have some conversations, because that's the whole point. I start talking, I open the conversation, and then we all join in and come up with some stuff that could work for us and for women. Like I said, my grandmother told me years and years and years ago that women have to look out for one another, because women all around the world have the same troubles. And to that I add, when one woman succeeds, all women win. So part of women's leadership for me is supporting women in winning, is helping women to win. And that's one of the reasons why when I chaired that political party in 2014, I asked who are the women who are going to be running. And I worked really hard to ensure that we had at least those two. I campaigned really hard. I spoke with them, the women and the men, over and over and over. And after the election, I had people tell me, I voted for the women because of you. That made me feel really good. I voted for the women because of you. I want us to be able to do that in our own little ways. Yes? So thank you all very, very, very much for being here with me again this afternoon. Tomorrow afternoon, again, I'll do it a little bit earlier. I'm moving. I'm on the west coast of the United States at the moment. I'm moving east, so the time zone is going to change. But I'm going to be doing them at different times of the day, because different women in different time zones can so they can participate. Because I don't expect, it would be really, really nice, but I don't expect any of you to be here every single one of the 45 days. I would be so deeply honored, but I don't expect it. And in any case, what I would like to do is put it at times which are convenient for women in different time zones, because the point of this is that we have perspective and engagement and contribution from all the different kinds of women that there are in the world. Okay, so thank you all very, very, very much, and I will see you tomorrow. And don't forget to share this with your friends and invite some other women to come log on or to watch it, because I post them on social media sites as soon as we're finished, so they can watch them at their own convenience. I do that with some things. 2:00 in the morning is when I get to watch some things. All right, so thank you very, very much. Have a wonderful time. Jamal's grandma, it's good to see you. Take good care.